Hello, everyone. So, welcome to the recap of Flutter 3.10. I see. Please write a comment if you can actually see me. So, I believe that you should actually see right now the broadcast. Okay, finally, good. So, welcome on the recap of Flutter at Google I/O and recap of Flutter 3.10. I'm excited to share with you the latest updates and improvements that our amazing Flutter community has been working on. This release brings significant enhancement to web and mobile integration, breakthrough graphics performance via impeller, and a lot of more. So let's dive in. But before we actually start, I want to speak about Google I/O event and focus on main key points. For those who haven't actually seen the event, the key points are AI, Google AI, generative AI, new AI, and lots of AI. I believe most of you have actually seen that 15 seconds video where only AI sounds on. And actually, some guy counted the numbers of AI mentioned on Google I/O, and it was something around 140. But let's talk seriously. For real, they showed amazing Palm 2 models, which are now used for list of Google products, Gmail, Documents, Magic Editor, Bard. All those products are amazing. They're gonna make our life simpler. And Palm 2 actually is available via API and Firebase, and you can try it right now. Eventually, they made Palm 2 Palm 2 models in different sizes. So there is actually a size where you can integrate it into your mobile app, which is amazing. And let's speak about the AI and the Google 2023. It seems pretty clear that AI itself now is the core product, or at least it's some kind of backbone of that product. Google is throwing generative AI at everything. So let's see where it's gonna give a plan and what they're gonna show us next year or even this year. But let's get back to our main theme and let's talk about the job that the Flutter team made for us as well. Finally, we were introduced with Flutter 3.10, and now it's available. I think it's a pretty major release that would be a constant number in most of the projects for a while. It brings so much stability and twice much new things. I know that sounds kind of controversial, but let's actually take a look. And before actually we start discussing what's new, let's step back to event held in Nairobi early this year. The Flutter team outlined 4 major directions of developing Flutter, and they are breaking through graphic performance, seamless integration for web and mobile, and early into newer and emerging architectures, and continued focus on developer experience. So those are the main ones. And what can I say about it, except they actually did it. And now it's available via Flutter Upgrade command. But don't believe my word, let's go one by one and start with graphic updates. For graphic updates, we have impeller, iOS huge improvements, and stability. Let's start with this tricky stability thing. So many of you may know that in Flutter 3.0, on Android they enabled a feature that used advanced GPU driver. This driver feature paint less of the screen when only one region changes, resulting in performance improvement. However, practical use cases and device support were limited, so partial repaint feature was disabled for this version. It remains enabled on iOS when using the Skia backend and is expected to be enabled with Impeller in future releases, but for the stability reasons, it was just removed. As for iOS huge improvements, what I'm talking about is that the fix decreased startup latency by 100 milliseconds, or approximately it's from 30 to 50% in large production applications. They also enhance loading local images from the platform thread. It caused some delays in vsync events, and to mitigate this, the opening and decoding of local images were actually removed from the Dart thread to a background thread. And yep, it gives us multiple simultaneous, so it actually reduced the load time for multiple simultaneously images by 50%. And let's talk about Skia. Skia used to be a great choice, but it was not created fully designed for Flutter needs. Lots of open issues were closed with attempts to modify Skia to fit Flutter. But it was clear that a new renderer is needed, and thanks to model architecture in Flutter, it wasn't very painful to change it to another more powerful Flutter-suitable renderer, Impeller. Impeller becomes the primary rendering engine on iOS. This new rendering engine brings improved performance to our animations and eliminates the troublesome shader compilation issues that cause chunky animations. You can follow this link just to check a full video of representing Impeller. They showcase Wondrous app and Kaleidoscope app. If you haven't seen this before, just go on and follow this link. Look at this after the stream. You will be very surprised. In Flutter 3.10, Impeller is the default rendering engine for all iOS apps developed with Flutter. Furthermore, the Flutter team has revealed their ongoing efforts to bring Impeller on Android. So I think in the nearest preview version, it will be available just in a preview mode for Android. And not to stop on this a lot, let's move forward to the outline directions. And the next one is seamless integrations with web and mobile. So we represented like with element embedding, macOS and iOS can use shared code in plugins and GNI Gen. Most of you probably have heard about FFI Gen, but today, not actually today, but in May, we're presented with GNI Gen, a tool for generating the code, the platform code, which is pretty interesting, and it is not very stable yet, like an FFI one, but you may look at this and try it yourself. As for the element embedding in web, you can follow this link and watch the full video on element embedding and how it can be done, made by EPAM professionals. Early to new architectures with WebAssembly. So in Flutter Forward, we were told that you can actually compile your app to WebAssembly, and today it's the truth, but the thing is that the development of WebAssembly support for Dart and Flutter remains ongoing, and it's not stable yet, but you may try to do it and to preview it in the preview and try to preview it in the preview channels. And now let's check the most interesting part of our journey is the continued focus on developer experience. We were introduced with Dart-free, Salsa Level 1, and DevTools. First of all, let's take a look at Salsa. So what is actually Salsa? Salsa means supply chain levels for software artifacts. Ensuring security is a critical aspect when we're working with open source. That's why Flutter now supports supply chain level for software artifacts, level 1 only. This implementation enables Flutter build scripts to operate it on trusted platforms, and furthermore, the releases workflow involving like for each new version of Flutter, it should go under the process, and that involves multiple engineers. These measures probably are in response to recent security attacks and vulnerabilities observed in the open source projects, such as NPM ecosystem. Probably have heard about that. The Flutter team is proactively taking steps to enhance the security of the ecosystem, making it more robust and reliable for developers. Let's talk about the DevTools, and we were presented like new material, free design, perfect trace view. So the memory page has received some new features. The addition of the div tool enables the comparison of memory usage before and after specific interactions, providing insights into the impact of those interactions. Furthermore, improvements have been made to streamline heap exploration directly from the console, which is actually great. The Perfecta is the open source tool, and it has been integrated, replacing the older trace viewer. Perfecta excels in managing large data sets and introduced features like pinning threads of interest, dragging, and selecting multiple timely events. So it's a very powerful tool which would definitely help you in debugging. And now let's get to the main thing, Dart-free. Dart-free announces and gives us 100% sound null safety, patterns, records, and class modifiers. Those things are really great. Let's talk about 100% null safe language. The journey began early in July 2020, and it almost 3 years, and the journey actually finished. Now we can say definitely that Dart is 100% sound null safe language. It is great announced, and we should be just happy for that the journey finished. Let's talk about the patterns. For me, it was a really mind-blowing feature, and it's really interesting to look how Flutter language evolves and what developers brings to us. Patterns would definitely change the way that we write code, most of the syntax, and it's a pretty major update comparing to those that we already spoke about. So what are patterns? Patterns are synthetic category in Dart language, like statements and expression. Pattern represents the shape of a set of values that may match against actual values. And patterns actually match the structure, and they do both. A pattern, by match, it means that the pattern always tests against a value to determine if the value has the form you accept. In other words, you are checking if the value matches the pattern or not. The structuring means when an object and pattern match, the pattern can then access the object's data and extract it in parts. In other words, the pattern structures the objects, and it does both. But it's only words. Let's actually look at what does that mean on a real example. Probably for most of you, this is pretty similar, except the record that you may see, like the type that metadata is a record, and it has like a named parameter string and named modified. But let's look into the decoding part. As you may see, we had to think about whether the JSON, whether there is a key in JSON, and if it's not nullable, then we should decode and write a lot of boilerplate code. But now the syntax is just this. And I think this is amazing because there are so much things we can actually do with that and implement these in real code. I think most of course uses code generators, but just think how can these be mitigated with code generators and how code generators can actually benefit from it. So much less code. Actually, there are lots of patterns and you may check them in documentation, and probably you should check them on documentation. So lots of scenarios, lots of interesting things. And the most hard thing for me to understand in patterns, how they actually make patterns matching. Patterns matching and exhaustiveness of the patterns. That's probably the most interesting part. And the first thing I thought about, how would that actually be, how that would actually benefit or not benefit the speed of the Flutter app. And actually all the pattern matching is going through on development stage, so it will just only benefit you. Another thing that Flutter team showed us are records. First time when I saw that on Flutter forwards, I thought, okay, something new, and that's kind of tuple that we have in Swift. But no, don't make mistake like me. It's not a tuple, it's a record, and record is definitely a different data set. So in records, we have all the parameters. All the parameters are named. Even you can see here, like we have name parameter, then just a named string, and name string, and name parameter between them. But they say that those are unnamed, but actually Dart itself creates a named getter, like $1, and you can actually get this by calling this getter. Of course, all the values are immutable, so there is no setter for that. And now let's talk about class modifiers. Actually, I have seen lots of holy wars for this theme. Everybody was waiting for it, but nobody waited this in this one that they presented us. And they would definitely benefit the development. They would actually help us as developers of API or in large production apps. But you should also keep in mind solid principles while developing it. You should reread all the OOP principles and think twice before using any class modifier that you're going to use. So we have abstract now, as we did before, nothing new to that. But before that, we also have base, final, interface, and it's just like for using with the keyword with. So I want to talk more about the sealed classes, and sealed classes have lots of to do with the exhaustiveness and pattern matching that we were talking previously. You can actually pattern match the interface class, but you would not be sure, and Dart would actually not be sure that the exhaustiveness on this case should. So you should write some kind of. I'm sorry, something happened to the stream. So let me get back the presentation. Okay, I hope now everything's good and you can see the presentation. So about the sealed classes. First thing I thought about, like, what can we do with sealed classes is, and what most of the developers do is like button state, but we can actually also create block events and states with sealed classes that would actually help a lot as well. And I believe that most of the code generators will reuse those class identifiers just to benefit all of us. And just a small look of what small things were also announced is inline classes, primary constructors, and I believe even much more. So that's pretty much it. Stay tuned for updates and thank you for the attention. If you have any question, you can actually post them. If not, just reach me and I'll try to answer them.